Hello and welcome to YouMatter. Hello and welcome to session 31 of YouMatter, where I'm talking to physiotherapists and business owners Nicola Graham and Helen Preston. Both Helen and Nicola made the shift into business ownership some years ago, and they're in a good position to talk about that sometimes tricky transition where perhaps in comparison to being a clinician, your concerns and your priorities might change. And you might be trying to make that shift on the back of perhaps no formal education in business ownership. They both tackled this in their own individual ways. And I think you'll quite enjoy hearing the distinction between their two particular journeys. We also have a discussion at the end around leadership, what leadership means, and perhaps who might be emerging in the future as some symbolic leaders in our profession. So as ever, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll be very interested to hear your reflections and feedback. And I will be back at the end of the session. Hello and welcome to session 31 of YouMatter, where I have two guests this morning, two female business owners, Helen Preston and Nicola Graham. So Helen Preston of Preston's Health in Petersfield, is that right? Peterborough, and Nicola Graham of Tops Health in, I'm going to guess, Oxfordshire, is that right?
That's right.
Got that one right. And Nicola is also director of MSKPN. Now, Nicola, Helen, and I have had some very brief discussions, mainly over WhatsApp, around the concept of being a clinic owner or a business owner. Or both. And we're going to talk about that sort of subtle distinction when we get into the discussion. But really, all three of us actually are business owners and physiotherapists. And we wanted to talk about the internal tussle that we all recognize between shifting from being a clinician to then owning a business, varying levels of comfort around taking money at all and then making profit. And we know that we're not alone in that because there are endless discussions online about this topic. So without any further ado, let's get straight into it. Helen, you gave me a lovely line. You said when you started out in business, which I know you inherited from your dad with all this kind of concomitant things that means, you said, when I started running my business, I wasn't even comfortable with making money out of physiotherapy. And I made a decision at that time that I was going to be the business, which is a really interesting statement. So can you tell me what you meant by that? Why was there comfort in being the business at that time?
I think for me, I was comfortable with discovering myself as a physio and being the best physio I could be. And so it was really just focusing completely on that rather than anything really to do with the financial element of running a business that needed to have all the structure involved. So although I did inherit my business from my dad, it was a one-man practice in a garage, he hates me saying that, next to the house. And it actually became a much bigger thing within a few years because we knocked it down and redeveloped, and I bought property off my parents and redeveloped it, and it suddenly had a massive financial context around it. But it didn't change my mindset that in the way that looking back it possibly should have done. So yeah, it was all around the physio and focusing totally on the physio. And at that point, I had no concept of understanding the way I do now confidently the importance of driving best practice business-wise as well as clinically.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot more about the sort of journey you've been on with that, Helen, and the things that have helped you change that mindset. But I think that what you've just said, so many people will identify with. I've got this discomfort around making money out of my business, but I'm really comfortable with striving very hard to be the best clinician I can. And as long as everyone sees that I'm trying to be an amazing physio, then I'm okay. I'm okay with myself. Is that fair?
Fair.
Nicola, if you take yourself back to the same point, presumably there was the same point where you shifted from a clinician within a business to deciding to run a business. Can you remember where your head was at that time?
Yeah, my father owned his own business, and so on, like entrepreneurship kind of was in our blood, or my blood. And I so what happened for me is I was finishing my MACP masters in Birmingham, and my boyfriend at the time was living in Oxford, and so I either had a choice to go back to London where there was a job waiting for me in private practice, or come to Oxford and see if there was something relationship wise there. So I went for an interview at a business, the Oxford Physiotherapy service, TOPS. And at that first interview, the lady said to me that I'm looking for someone to take over the business. And straight for me, that was kind of a light bulb moment of that's what I've always wanted. So I've got the opportunity here of combining what my career is with business. And so it was quite an easy decision for me, because it was like a door being opened. What my personality is I jump into everything kind of 2 feet first and then think about it afterwards. And it was only when I actually then took over the business, which was nearly kind of 4 years later from that initial kind of conversation. So mine was a management buyout, as the owners were retiring. I that change, actually, from having to manage and lead a team of clinicians that were more experienced than me, that had been in the business for longer than me, and I'm pretty gung-ho and don't really, and I was only, how old was I? I was 29. And so it was actually quite, it's only when afterwards you reflect back, you think, God, I could have done things so much differently, or I could have had those conversations in such a better way. But I think for me, there was never an identity issue with the business, because I'd bought an existing business. I hadn't founded it myself, so I didn't have that emotional attachment to it in the same way. Mine was more around, I had absolutely no skills in how to be a leader and how to be a manager. And that's the bit I had to learn massively on the job. And I think for me also, because I bought an existing business, it was never my name above the door. And I've tried to work my way out of the business as much as possible, so that because I think I always had a goal in mind to sell at some point, that I didn't want it associated with me as a person. So I think I didn't consciously make that decision. It was kind of more maybe the context of where it was and how I came into business, that it was never really associated with me as a person. I've been obviously fundamental in its kind of growth, but I've a load of the clients and the patients wouldn't even know who I was in some respect, and I've quite liked that, because it's allowed me to make probably more objective decisions about it as a business rather than as anything related to me as a person. Don't get me wrong, I'm highly emotional as well, but I think I've been able to distance myself in some way from it from the get-go.
Yeah. I can relate very much to your story, Nicola, in terms of the same process. I bought into an existing business, and at the time that business was very much associated with the previous owner's name. He was brilliant. He was known for working with Gloucester Rugby. Everybody knew Chris's name, and although it was called Courtyard Clinic then, it was almost, that's Chris's clinic. And I bought in with a colleague. We're 50-50 owners, and we made the same decision at the start, that we don't want this business to be about our name, which was sort of just intuitive at the time, but probably also helpful in that identity process that you've just talked about. But I completely also identify with you, Helen, and that I think it wasn't so much a shift in me as much as I recognized a shift in the way the people working in the clinic related to me. And I almost sensed that overnight, people who I'd been very much an equal with and a junior to, like you, Nicola, in many ways, suddenly put me somewhere that I felt really uncomfortable. And it wasn't just, you're now running this business. It was almost like there were characteristics which were never part of my makeup, and I didn't identify with. In hindsight, I needed to grow into some of that identity to be able to take control. I think I wanted to stay everybody's friend and mate for too long, but I found the shift too quick, and it didn't feel comfortable at all. Do either of you identify with that?
Yeah, and it is. I mean, you said to me, Joe, something pretty powerful. So we've just started. We haven't just started a new business, but we have opened up a new branch in an area we have been in before. But we've got a proper room, and it's a long story. I won't go into that part of it. But you said to me, we decided we would set up this clinic that is the idealist. I've learned so much about this whole journey of physio business, and I'm okay with saying that word now. Let's set this business up as an idealistic business. And you said something very pertinent to me, Joe, around because I was like, oh, I could just nip in, because a lot of it's to do with recruitment. So I'll just nip in. I could always just bridge that gap. I'll bridge that gap, and I'll do a few hours there or whatever. And you were like, this is actually, if you want this to be a business that's not going to be about you, you've got to not do that.
Not do clinics.
Not do clinics. So, we've set this up, and there are lots of compromises we're having to make around insurance and different things, because we're not seeing insurance. We're doing a prepay business, but as a business model. The other thing actually you said we discussed was about this kind of idea of, actually, I'm not altogether emotionally attached to the outcome of its success. Like, it is, I'm trying to see if it's possible. And if it's not got the emotional attachment that, say, the Peterborough business would have, if I couldn't make that work. So it's yeah, I think I'm beginning to see the change in that one of my characteristics.
I do
not change. Am I leaning in? I'm leaning into something that I wouldn't have lent into before.
Yeah, and that sounds like sort of externalizing the business, making it an entity which is not actually part of you. I love that idea that you picked up on, of not being too emotionally attached to it. I know we all are, and we want success, but to be able to put it outside of yourself and almost play with it and say, let's see what this thing does.
There was a really interesting, and I'm trying to think of the context of it now, but it was talking about, I think, performance and failure and things, and actually how, I know what it was. It was around growth mindset, and actually how you do need to not associate yourself with failure or success in that way. And yes, they can be opportunities for learning and experience, but I'm not sure I'm going to get the detail completely correct here, but it was on one of Huberman's podcasts, but there was this element about not associating yourself too much to that identity, because then when you do have a failure or something goes wrong, it's like it's so personal to you. And at the end of the day, we're all going to have ups and downs in life, in business and personal, but how we kind of contextualize that and how we move on from that is what allows us to have some resilience around it. And so, yeah, I think that identity thing is a really interesting aspect, because we are delivering quite a personable service in a bespoke, individualized way to everyone. And therefore it is there's an emotional aspect to it if you care. Like, there are some people that will deliver it and that will be mediocre and it's not great, but it exists. But if you truly care of the outcome of the treatment that you're giving, of course, there's an emotional element to it, and you truly care the reputation of what your clinic is, the brand, and how it's perceived, and aspects around that. Because so that kind of being able to distinguish between the two, I think it's also understanding that there's a paradox there, that you can be emotionally attached to it, but it not drive or control you. So you can have some control over it. But of course you're going to care, because it's your business. And if you didn't care, it wouldn't be successful. So you have to be kind of comfortable with being uncomfortable in that situation as well, which I think only comes with a certain amount of experience, or at a point in your life that you can take that all on board, because it's pretty emotional in its own right to be able to consider it in that way.
Yeah, being comfortable with the uncomfortable is a really good phrase. What do you both think about the fact that probably because of the size of most clinic businesses, most business owners do some kind of work in their clinics. Yes, a lot of us try and extract ourselves over time, but the reality is, to a greater or lesser extent, most business owners do still practice clinically. Do you think that creates a problem?
Do you want me to go? Because I've got probably a different. I don't work clinically anymore. So I stopped in 2017 on my second maternity leave. I just knew I didn't have the headspace. If I was with a patient, I was thinking about all the admin business side I needed to do. If I was doing the business side, I was thinking about a rehab program I hadn't sent. And then you still got 2 children, a husband, a family life to try to kind of fit in. So to me, it was more of a mental capacity. And then it was what do I enjoy the most? And I felt like I'd had a really great clinical career, but I'd probably reached my ceiling point of that. And mine was also around, why am I doing this? And if I'm with a patient one-on-one or a client one-on-one, I'm having an impact at that level. When I own the business and I can manage and lead the team, I have an impact at a much larger level. So the decisions that I could make outside of a treatment room, I felt for me had a greater impact on health in our community, because I could influence the way the services were delivered within our business. And I can't do that from inside a treatment room. So for me, it was really important to be able to kind of distinguish between the two. I also knew that if I was trying to make decisions, it's great that I think I've had a clinical career, but if I was trying to make decisions of, I'd probably have gone for easier options on some things, or gone, oh, actually, we don't need to do that, or I would have found reasons or something not to, because it would have made my job harder, maybe as a clinician, or different as a clinician. And so I think that degree of objectivity, while I can relate it always to my clinical career, sometimes that degree of objectivity was important to me. But I think it's hard to sit with both hats, and there will be a ceiling point where either one will, I think, probably stop progressing. So either the business will stop progressing or your clinical career will stop progressing, because we only have a certain capacity for everything. And so if you're trying to do both, I think that is tough. You can still have a great business and a great clinical career. But as I say, I think there's a ceiling point where you just have to hand. And there's also a point where you go, I'm not the best. So I think I became a better business owner because there were other people that were much more engaged in the clinical side and their development. And so I think it's okay to know that you're not expected, or you can be the best at everything as well. So if you're not the best clinician, don't be the clinician. Hire better people than you in your team to do that clinical service, and you do the bit that you're really interested in. So to me, that was quite, as I say, maternity leave was because when you start to, that patients will want to stay with you. And so for me, it actually was just a great line in the sand. Like, I'm away now for a few months. I still teach one Pilates class a week. But what I know is that the business is not reliant on that revenue. And for me, it's more of my own health and well-being, be doing the exercise. And I get to see people that are part of the business for the last they've been coming for 10, 15 years to Pilates. And so it's a great way of being able to speak to like 20 people in an hour, where if I was doing physio, I would only have seen 1 or 2 people in that hour. So it's a great way. And the other thing that I love to do is I sit on reception quite often in the week, because it's a great way to chat to people and find out their niggles and what they're unhappy with or not happy with. And I couldn't do that if I was if I was carrying a caseload as well.
Yes.
But that's the only way it worked for me. The one other thing I'll just add in is, because I had 2 young children, they're only 7 and 5 now, but when I took on the business, so 2013, I didn't have any children. My children were born in 2016 and 2017. The only way I felt I could run my business, the only part that I could add value to really, is I couldn't see patients during the day when I'm having to look after children. But what I could do is I can do business admin in the evening when the children were asleep. So it actually is what worked for me personally, is being involved in the business admin, not trying to hold a clinical caseload down, that I therefore wouldn't have been able to take my kids to the park in the day or something like that I wanted to do. So it was more around fitting with my personal needs of trying to be a mum as well.
So there were lots of business needs and also personal needs. You just reminded me of around the time we were purchasing the business, my kids were really young. And I remember talking to solicitors and accountants and trying to sound like I knew what I was doing. And somebody had just wet themselves in the kitchen and thrown something at somebody else. And if I could have like a life mute button at that moment, it would have been helpful. So Helen, your situation is a little different, isn't it? I know you still do work clinically. Where do you sit on this?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's totally ballsy, because if you let go of your HCPC, Nicola, am I thinking?
Yeah, only literally when the last registration was. So I stopped work 2017, kept some CPD going, but wasn't really seeing, as I said, there's one guy that I occasionally would see, an ultramarathon runner, but just because I knew him. And then, so when was the last registration? 2022, was it? Because it's due again in 24, isn't it? So yeah, I get that was the last time I gave it up, which at the time felt like nothing, like, because you just don't renew it. Afterwards, when people would be like, what do you do? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know what to say now, because for 18 years I've been like, I'm a physio, and that just kind of rolled off my tongue. And suddenly I was like, I run physio businesses. And so I had to kind of reword what my kind of opening gambit of who I am. So there was a lot tied into the identity of being a physio that I didn't give credit to until I gave it up. And then suddenly it was like, oh no, I'm not a physio anymore. But actually that was I needed that. And my mum was like, don't do it, like just maintain it. And I was like, no, because this needed to be a line in the sand to say, I am not a physio. I own a physio business, but my focus is on business. That's what I enjoy and love actually now. And that's the area I want to concentrate on. So I'm not a physio. But it was it was hard.
I think it's look, I think it's a great it's like such a great decision, like that. It's a crossroads, right? And you've chosen this trajectory, and I think I'm definitely not there. I can't actually see myself getting there, but I really admire it, not because necessarily I'd want to. That's the decision for me, but I think it's great.
Let's hear the other side, Helen, about why you don't want to do that.
I think I've got, and I can see this in myself with certain arguments along the way I've got myself into. And I did do the CSP physio leadership program when it first came out. I can't actually remember what year it is. I'm going to say it was 2016. And I think that part of my identity isn't just being with physio. I think it's kind of like aspects of the physio profession. I'm a third generation physio. I'm actually the sixth physio in my family. We've actually already got a fourth generation, so we've got a seventh physio in the family, of which I'm really proud of my relationship with my niece, who has just qualified as physio, and the relationship we've got around mentoring. Kind of like I'm trying to help her see the wood from the trees of all the things that you could get easily waylaid with in those early years. And I don't think I'm done with being a physio of where the potential for physio can go yet, if that makes sense. So, my clinical practice was and still is really important to me as a physio. Like the buzz I get from being with a patient and getting that life change is what keeps me going. And actually, certainly from my perspective, I've done a lot of coaching, Nicola, with Joe, and actually embedding loads of that coaching stuff. I can hear Joe in my ear a lot.
Sorry about that.
And what I'm seeing with more of the mentoring, because I took a conscious decision in January, and this was felt so ballsy, and I'm so slow to the party on this. I have 3 clinical days, which I really try not to do any business on. I do have to do aspects, but I don't do meetings or anything, and I'm being really strict with that time, so I can totally focus on patients and try and fill my list for those days. And then I have 2 days non-clinical, and I'm really strict with that and not seeing patients and that. So I am definitely, which hat am I wearing today? But within those 2 days, I will do some of the mentoring with staff, and it depends of the level of experience, particularly in private practice, that physio's got. But in terms of just some reflections back from one physio that I'm working with at the moment, was like, I thought I was coming into physio to fix people. And now, because she's actually done the Peter O'Sullivan course, which I've done lots of cognitive functional therapy workshops, I've done about 7, I think. And, he's very much around kind of walking alongside the patient, empowering the patient, not abandoning the patient, but empowering the patient. And she goes, I thought it was all about fixing patients, but what we do here is very much not that, and it's much more of this coaching approach. And I just thought, yeah, this is where I can see my value is growing the physio business through seeing our value in what we can give patients that is beyond how long it takes a tendon to heal, or how long, that the intricacies of that has nothing to do with the relationship with what we gain with our patients in our value to accompany them on their journey. And so I probably waffled my way through that one, but it's just this idea that I'm not done yet with experiencing what I think physio can be. And I love the creativity that can give me in physio. And I am confident now, so I'm confident to ask probing questions and allow the science to happen with my patients, and I love that. And hopefully then grow confidence of others. So in the same way that you were saying there, Nicola, around the business confidence, it's and the bigger effect. I'm kind of like, yeah, trying to see how that can then feed into the business element, because it has massive implications into business. Because if you think that 2 or 3 treatment sessions is developing relationships with your patients to get them where they need to be, and you see them once in a blue moon along the line, I'm not sure as a physio you're really seeing your value to be able to get the best out of that relationship. We have so much to offer. We're just cultured into underselling ourselves.
Yeah, and you've led me beautifully into the next topic, Helen. And I know value, Nicola, is something you've been speaking about recently, and you've been posting about quite a lot. You shared a TED talk by Casey Brown on LinkedIn last week, and there was a line in that which I really wanted to pick apart with you both, actually. So she's not talking about a clinical business. She is actually a business advisor, I think, isn't she, or a business coach or something like that. And she was saying, I'll get the line wrong as well, but she said people will value you according to what they think you're worth, and you control their thinking, which is a fair point. And definitely we can take control of our consumer, if we use that not very nice phrase about our clients for a moment, their thinking. But the thought that went through my head is, yes, but our thinking is very much controlled by history, culture, what we've decided makes us good girls and good boys. For us to get over our own thinking first is possibly the bigger mountain to climb than changing the thinking of the people we're selling our services to. You're nodding away, Nicola. Do you agree?
I do. Like, I've always felt, I never felt like I belonged or fitted into healthcare, because I think I probably have a bit of, I do have an ESTJ kind of personality, and I've always sat, this is probably slightly off, but I've always sat more comfortably with men's beliefs and men's kind of, and there's that great saying, that isn't there, that if there's a job description, a man would apply for it even if they only fulfilled 60% of the criteria. A woman wouldn't apply if they don't have 100% of that criteria. And I think that we are slightly more risk averse maybe in nature. I think it's interesting that probably, and I don't know actually the stats nowadays of what the gender of physios, but historically I know obviously it's been female dominant, but probably then with male decision maker or the business owners. And I'd be really interested to know where those stats kind of sit nowadays. But I think there's a lot of, you can't ever get away from kind of the societal or how we're brought up as people. I think physios are generally quite high achievers. We're quite thinkers. We may have considered the medicine route and then not gone that route. But also that we can't go away from how we're tied into NHS culture from a training perspective. And therefore the majority of us will have done science-based A-levels and studying prior to then doing physio. We've not done business, economics, anything along those lines. And then we go into a course that is completely set up for a clinical technical, which again, it should be really at that point in someone's career. But the context is very much you're going to go into an NHS setting or an NHS environment, and therefore there's nothing around money or anything that sits into a more of a strategic commercial different soft skills that would be needed in negotiation and advocacy and then I think alongside that we've had years of disruption, COVID related, but also with this big focus on within a professional leadership point of view on the demands and the challenges of the public health systems and not the demands and the challenges of the private health system that a high proportion of the profession work in as well. And so you then that's kind of a complete fireball mix of aspects going on. But with a lack of, we've also got then the independent healthcare sector, which, as you say, are quite small. I don't know where this term kind of cottage style comes from, but that cottage style industry where we don't have a national representative company that isn't, we do now, but they're very PMI associated, B2B2C kind of relationships. So you still don't have that. What does the PR piece of what physio looks like to the general public look like? Because we've got the comparison of, I'm going to use big generalizations here, but you've got NHS, one session or a tele kind of appointment, sheet of unpersonalized exercise, off you go, right through to then in the independent, the same kind of maybe a digital health kind of high volume, low value in some respects physio. And so we haven't had like a blueprint or a benchmark of this is, and then you've got elite kind of sport, which again, fantastic service, but it's not like you wouldn't be able to, it's hard to run that as a commercial service because you're spending like 4 hours a day with someone. They're not going to pay for that. So we don't have this like benchmark of what is good commercial practice in the UK. And I'm not sure we have it, but there are different options in kind of Australia and New Zealand. But so we're all struggling to know, what are we striving for? What's the ambition? What's the inspiration? What would we like that to look like? How do we benchmark that across the industries? Because we're all doing something different. We're all delivering it differently. We're all thinking about it differently. We've all got different arrangements with PMI companies, referrals, and that's fine. Obviously, that's a competitive market, but it's a very siloed, fragmented market as well. And it's probably only now with the continuing kind of more macroeconomic challenges of people struggling to get public health services and therefore coming into more and more people coming and paying privately for something that they wouldn't have done before, that to me, it makes me think, how are we delivering it? And I think it feeds really much into, Helen, what you're talking about around the coaching aspect of that is what we are doing as physios. We're trying to make behavioral changes, and that is therefore there's coaching elements to that. And that definitely doesn't happen in 1, 2 or 3 sessions. That is a longer term. But if we've got a political and public health, where it's very short term, it's very budget driven, there aren't any long-term incentives. That's the message that the general public have around health. And that's why, in my opinion, it's undervalued, is because we don't have a lofty kind of moonstar ambition of what we're trying to aim for on a larger scale. Preventative healthcare is something that we talk about, but it's not in action anywhere. So we undervalue it when we don't know what we're aiming for. We don't know what the purpose of where we're going for, but also because we're fighting against tide, and we're having a lot of external pressures put on us as to this is how many treatments you should give someone. So we've lost that autonomy, really. That is part of us being physios as a profession, is that we're meant to be autonomous. So we're autonomous in our clinical profession from the point of view of our assessment and how we treat people, but we have, I think, quite limited autonomy in how we run our businesses to some degree. We can run it how we want to, but there's a lot of external pressures being put on us around what that should look like, that are not coming from a clinical perspective or a patient outcome perspective. In my opinion, they're coming from a financial perspective.
Gosh, you walked us through an amazing journey or description there of sort of, the last 10, 20 years of our profession, Nicola. And so many things you said chime with thoughts I've had over the years, one of which is, are there many other professions where you're working in a business sense alongside a massive sector of your same profession that is publicly funded? And I always feel this. I haven't worked in the NHS for 20 years, but I still feel this constant pullback from the type of things you've just said. And I think this is where the autonomy goes, this kind of unsaid, you should do this number of treatments, and actually you shouldn't charge more than this, and you could fill in those gaps. But I think we're always being pulled back. It's almost like an NHS conscience that is causing this tension in us all. But there was actually something at the end of that TED talk that you shared, Nicola, which I've heard other people say, and in some ways is helpful to me, that if you think about the service user and you actually think about what you want to provide for them, and you just touched on things like preventative health, longer term real solutions, if you really, really feel into that, then it becomes easier to talk about what you're doing and why it's valuable. But you're absolutely right, that isn't a coherent conversation or message from this private sector. And that's tricky when the public messaging is, I think we all feel and believe a lot of the same things, but we're not getting that across it consistently, I don't believe. Helen, you're looking thoughtful. What are your thoughts on this?
Just going full circle into this whole identity thing for me was, I think the idea of business. So Celia Champion calls this sort of an element of value and money, mental money baggage. And that's something that actually she came into our business with our team, and it really shifted mindset. There was lots of good engagement around that, around kind of like, it's almost, it also goes full circle as us as humans. How do we value our worth as humans as to what we then project onto our patients in terms of value? And I think that's a lot of my self-worth improving has helped my clinical practice, because I see that value, and I'm much more comfortable selling that value. And really where my mindset would change was that the word business, my old view and my old mindset around business probably had what I do believe is mental money baggage, that a lot of culture in physio is that, if you're focusing on money, then you're just interested in the money, and it's just all about kind of like what that your relationship is with money. Whereas actually, I still haven't really changed my mindset around what I view. What I'm trying to say is that I think my view of business is now actually what is best for the patient is best for business. So actually, let's but it's focusing what if we can get really good, if we can have really good outcomes, which goes back to what Nicola was kind of trying to say, I think, around this whole idea of a blueprint and a benchmark. If we can just explore that, it's great for business and it's great for patients. And we've just got to get out of the idea that we're all trying to, the idea that making money out of it's a bad idea, because everybody needs to pay their bills. And I remember a discussion I had with you, Nicola, around sort of physio ownership and physio businesses. And the state of the physio industry right now, none of us are going to come out multi-millionaires, right? So we're just trying to have purpose and do our best for our patients and stay financially sustainable, that we can help more people. And it's kind of like having to absorb all of that messaging.
Here's a question for you. Sorry, Nicola.
I was going to say that on that aspect of that, it's that, Helen, it's that, like, from a business point of view, and this is where my MBA, I think, kind of was light bulb moments of this. It's like shareholder versus stakeholders. Like, if you are solely focusing on your shareholder of your business, which is either you as an individual, or if it's a larger group, other people as well, then that's a short-termism, and things will go wrong. It will either show up in toxic culture, too money-driven. You just won't have a great business if you are solely focusing on that. But if you're looking after your stakeholders as a whole, and that includes your shareholders, but it's more of a holistic view of who is referring into your business, your patients, your staff, that is from both we're saying things that is proven in the management and business research, that is the long-term success of a business. And that's what makes it sustainable. That's what makes it viable long-term. So you can't just focus on shareholders, as I say, and we all know businesses that have done that. And they're either not innovating, or they just lose all their best people because it becomes too money driven. So it's that looking at all your stakeholders related to your business and how you manage and balance them all. And there will be different priority levels within there, but majority it will be staff and clients, patients at the top of it. And then everyone else should kind of filter under that: PMI companies, referrers, shareholders. But yeah, you need to have like a holistic view of everyone that impacts your business and how you manage and look after them.
Do you use that process in decision making, Nicola? Sort of visualizing a triangle of, these are the three parties that I need to make sure this works for. Have I satisfied all of those?
So on my MBA module, Managing Organizational Performance, which is what I've done my MBA dissertation on as well, I did a stakeholder analysis of a physio business. And and then you've got your internal and your external stakeholders, and how it's not a triangle, it's actually circles. And you've got ones that are urgent, ones that are dangerous, ones that are, so it's quite detailed. I've posted a picture of it on LinkedIn that I did for my hand-in of my assignment, and it's a great way of analysing your stakeholders and thinking about them in different ways and who your priorities are. And then, as I say, my MBA dissertation looked at managing, so organizational performance, which includes some stakeholder analysis, and then the leadership styles. And it's a very, very small data set of some MSKPN business leaders. But we are massively lacking, I think, symbolic leadership within our profession. And that is the vision of where we're going, what it looks like, bringing people along that journey. We're good at structural, we're good at human resources. So we can, those are parts of like leadership frames, but we're not great at political, which is how we negotiate, how we advocate, like how we deal with conflict within organizations, that competitive aspect, which does need to exist within a commercial world. And competition is good. Like, obviously we want a degree of collaboration, but if we also have a bit of a competitive market, it will make us all be better as well. It will drive up the standards, because and that doesn't need to be a bad thing. Like entrepreneurs are bringing, like, they can be best of friends, but they can still have competitive businesses kind of thing, because it will actually make us all be better if we're challenging each other and we're having difficult conversations about why do you do things that way. But I think we either haven't had that, or if it happens on social media, it goes toxic. And we all know those conversations that have kind of happened in the past, and that makes us lose our identity even further, because like manual exercise, well, let's have all of it. Like, we can deliver all of it. But yeah, the symbolic of like, where are we going? And obviously this all leads into, at the moment, the new CEO of and the new chief executive, who the CSP is going to be. We don't know who that is yet. So when that, or maybe that will be a bit of a turning point for us to see where the bigger picture of the profession is going. Because health promotion is an aspect of physio that, like, it should always have been there, but you can't really deliver it when you've got one session or two sessions with someone. There's different priorities that you would put within that session. But if we're not delivering that health promotion and that preventative health piece, other people will. Other fitness work professionals will, other well-being professionals will. We will lose it, I think, as part of physio if we don't try to incorporate this now into our physio, because other people are going to be as qualified to do it as we are. And the rise of kind of that consumer healthcare, someone who wants to pay for their health, is basically what we're saying, pay for their health and well-being, that exists. And if we're not showing ourselves to be the profession that can deliver that, they will go elsewhere, because there is choice. There is just so much on the market that people can access. So we can't assume it sits under our realm or our professional scope if we're not delivering it for people. Yeah.
So, controversial question coming up. And you can decide how honest you want to be with it, both of you. So when we talk like this, I often think, how come physio hasn't got a kind of Specsavers or vet equivalent where, you know, all these small businesses have been taken over by large conglomerates? And to an extent, Nicola, it's, you know, we resist because of the things you were talking about toxic environments and too much emphasis on shareholder and losing really the holy grail that we're all chasing, I think, which is that balance where we do manage to provide amazing service, create businesses that sustain us and the people that work with us. I think that's why, and I think we should pat ourselves on the back that physio hasn't, or private physio hasn't gone that way. But this idea of symbolic leadership, I love that phrase, Nicola, and I agree with you. If we're lacking that, my controversial question is, do you think there is a possibility that kind of leadership and direction and consistent messaging, particularly around preventative health, is going to come from the organisations we are already in theory led by? Or do you think there needs to be a rising up of a new leadership group? And I know, you know, you may say MSKPN is one of those, and there are others emerging. Controversial, and yeah, I realize that's an uncomfortable question to be asked and answered, but what do you think? Go for it.
I'm happy to jump in, because I don't find that uncomfortable at all.
Maybe that shouldn't surprise me.
I do. So I've gone full circle in some of my thinking on this, because so Australia and New Zealand do have franchise physios, and I don't know much about what they do from a kind of quality, are the staff happy, all that kind of thing. They're private equity backed, of course they would be. You need some investment around some of that. There are groups trying to do that in the UK. I'm not convinced solely on the model yet, because the model sits in, the reason Specsavers makes money is because it's the glasses. It's nothing to do with the therapy, the consultation, the assessment. So actually what we're saying here is, physio, just delivering physio sessions is low value, and it probably will, like, I think what I'm coming around to is maybe there is a ceiling point. We can't just charge £300 an hour. It's never going to work. So what is the high value that we offer? And I'm not sure we've created, or we know what that is yet, to allow there to be a larger volume model. But I am, and the reason I kind of why I never wanted the business identified with me is because I'm quite open and happy to sell my business when to be part of a bigger group that is going to be a national presence and have a benchmark. So I have conversations with people all the time, and I think when the time is right, that's the direction I will go. And I do think my business is not about me from an ego perspective, and therefore I'm very happy to hand it on to a bigger group. I'm also not going to be, I don't think, the person that leads a bigger group. It's not my leadership style. I'm not good in, that's why I wasn't good in the NHS. I'm not good with bureaucracy, corporate governance, anything. I'm more the kind of disruptor. It's like startup kind of, what can we do differently? I'm not going to be that person that leads a bigger organization. I think 10 Health and Fitness do it really well across London. I think they have a good mixture of the exercise, they're quite reformer-based Pilates, but they do have physiology in there as well, exercise with the physio, so that integrated model. So I think there are small groups, we just don't have something national yet. I think COVID has put a big, like people that were of bigger companies, they took a big hit during COVID. And so it's financially taking a long time to get out of that. I think there's some other political factors that I would love that we were advocating for as a profession. We shouldn't have VAT on fitness related. So anything kind of exercise based, there shouldn't be. I think we shouldn't sit in our business rates, should be in leisure or be not have business rates. Like we're held up at every point to deliver better health services because we want to be professional, I suppose, in the professional services perspective, but associated with that are a high, so a lawyer can be in professional services, but they're on 200, 300 pounds an hour. So paying business rates isn't an issue. When we were on a patient visit average of somewhere between 60 and 80 pounds an hour, and we're paying the same overheads, fixed costs, it's really hard for us to advance as a profession. So I do believe in being part of a bigger group. I really liked the cooperative idea that Physio First had years ago. I don't know what ever happened to that or where it went. But I think there's also an aspect that we need to prove what we do, and that comes with data. Otherwise, someone external, we know we make great outcomes, but if we don't have the data, we can't go to anyone external who holds the purse strings on the money and the investment to say, this is what we do, because there's just nothing to prove it. So I think outcomes, proms, prems, Google reviews, any kind of forms of data that can show the experience that we give people, the outcomes that we deliver in a still a usable fashion, not collecting data for the sake of it. But yeah, I'm really pro being part of bigger groups. I suppose because my business is not tied into my identity, I look at it more of where does the profession need to go, and some consistency in different regional areas, and ideally across the whole of the country would be amazing, but not on an equivalent model of what the NHS is. So some of the private companies that deliver services on a large scale across the country, I can't see the difference between that and what the NHS is offering. Yeah. And so it's not, it might have created great shareholder returns. I don't know, but has it done anything good for the profession yet? I'm not sure it has.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicola. Helen, I'm going to come to you because I really want to hear your answer to that question as well. But in case I forget it, I just want to pick up on your point, Nicola, that you are very happy to be part of a theoretical group, but not the leader, because you don't have a certain skill set. You're more of a disruptor. I can totally buy into that mindset as well. So my challenge is, within the makeup of physios, is there anybody that really wants to take that top position?
And maybe it doesn't need to be a physio. It just needs to be someone that aligns with physio. What you actually need is you need to have a great CEO business mindset, because you will be running a business at that point. So you don't need to be a physio. You just need to align with physio's values and the professional values. I don't know. We it's an opportunity. It will only happen. Leadership doesn't happen overnight, so it only happens if people are taught, or they choose to, because they see the future of the profession, then they choose to invest their own personal and professional development in leadership. Leaders aren't kind of created. It's a skill. It's as much of a technical skill as being a great physio, and so there needs to be a reason that you would put time and your effort into a career to be a great physio leader. So it's a cat and dog in some respect.
Well, let's
like a chicken and egg kind of thing.
Let's put our request out to the world for that person to show themselves. Helen, I'm going to remind you of the question. Do we have the potential for this kind of symbolic leadership within the organizations we've already got, or do we need something new to emerge?
I mean, I know I am probably a serial empath, but I do have massive empathy for the CSP, of what they actually have to be. When you're talking about all the corporate governance and layers of bureaucracy and layers of historical culture embedded in the profession, you know, I now sit down with my starter physios with a kind of like very, very blatant, clear direction of what the NHS, I see and I perceive the NHS culture within physio to look like. And that's very generalistic, and that's very probably specific to the user end, service user end experience that I'm listening to. And then where we see ourselves as a business in terms of that culture. And you know, it's very, very different, because you know the NHS is just built bound by so many different pulls. You know, how can the CSP really provide leadership for those two magnetic pulls in opposite directions? So I you know, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with regards to the new CEO. But I have real empathy for those different pulls. So you know, yes, I do think other things need to emerge, and that's kind of like where Nicola and I sit in terms of the benefits of having an organisation like MSKPN. And you know, I remember I didn't even know anything about the MSKPN until you know, very early doors in COVID, and I can't even remember it. And I remember just having this opportunity to be talking to people. And I just sat there. I'm not sure, I probably sat there with my camera off, feeling really inadequate with all these sort of business owners on this discussion. And it was just so interesting, because it was obviously very similar business issues. And I think that was all part of how I've emerged, changing my mindset around the whole concept. Because you know, what you're saying about competitive businesses driving up standards, you know, there was something on there the other day around two businesses that were literally next to each other in London. And, you know, one of the other businesses helped out another business when their business was either flooded or fire or something. And the competitive businesses moved in with them. And, you know, if that's not great for patient care, you know, and the patient, and that whole kind of concept of all boats rise on a rising tide, you know, that, and I do think that, I mean, I would like to think we're not going to become siloed and just have a shed load of different organisations trying to, you know, I hope that we can all get behind groups that we're not always going to agree on all points, and just not have lots of different organisations trying to drive that up, because I think it just dilutes the messaging.
Yeah.
But
and to an extent, that's where we are at. That's where it feels like we're at the moment, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, time is ticking on. This discussion could go on endlessly. There's so many more topics. I think we might have to do a version 2 of this one. But can I ask you to leave us with, if you could put out a wish list for the next, let's say 5 years' time for our profession. What if you could have Michael Mosley as one thing to pick another health professional, what would it be?
Say that again, Joe, sorry.
So you get one outcome, one fairly significant thing that changes in our profession over the next 5 years to really change the direction, let's say for the private sector. What would be the one thing that you feel would give loads and loads of value, even though it was only one change? What would you choose?
I would say know our worth as a human. That's what I would say.
We all know our worth as a human in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Great. Nicola, what would yours be?
I think mine would be something around it'd be something about changing that belief of I did my physio, or my physio didn't work, or so it's something around empowering people that health isn't something that's done to them. It's something that you engage with professionals and experts to take you. So it's this proactive approach to accessing services to assist you in your own health and well-being journey. And we can partner with you at any point in that, because we have a range of services and expertise to do that. But it's not something we're doing for you. And it's not something, and that's internal and external. So it's all of our clients' patients. We're not doing physio for you. Physio is not a verb. It's not something we do. And that also then within the profession, it's not a static service that we offer. There's evolution, there's innovation. It changes with the needs of what is happening around us and the technology that exists. And there's so many kind of factors to it, but it empowers people to think of it as movement and dynamic, and something that we partner with. It's not something that's done for us.
Yeah, can
I bring in a bit of Brené there, Joe?
You can, and I'm going to marry both your things together, Helen, as well, because I think your human comes into that. But yeah, go for it.
But I remember a Brené podcast of my running podcast during COVID, which I had so many of, and just exactly around the concept there. She had she used the Spanish word acompañar, which was to walk alongside. And and there was a whole podcast all around that concept, and that's really what coaching is, isn't it? But it's exactly kind of like embedding that in the culture. I really like that idea, Nicola. I think it's if we could all buy into that, we all have to let go of our ego to be able to allow that to happen, because so many of our patients come in and tell us, "You've cured me," and I'm really careful to correct them when they say that. Like, no, I haven't got magic hands. I've helped you see your light. You know, we've got to get rid of that. We've got to get rid of our identity that we're healers and you know.
Yeah. I love but all of what you both just said, and I think they're so intertwined. You know, for us to be able to be confident in that, walking alongside, creating conditions for better health to emerge, we've got to be more confident in ourselves as humans. I love the dual definition of movement that came into your wish, Nicola, that, you know, we're from day one, we were about movement. I think sometimes we forget that. But if we can remember that, you know, movement is a flexible, adaptive thing dependent on the changing environment around it. And that actually is what we're really good at as physios, I think that we can do really well to hold on to that. I'm just going to add a little realization I've had, and it speaks very much to confidence in being a human, Helen. Somebody in more of my coaching sphere put out a question on Facebook. She wants to work with school leaving age girls, and she said, if your school leaving age self could have a message now, what would it be? And my response was to have known that whilst my academic and sporting achievements were probably admired, what I was probably valued for was making people feel comfortable and making them laugh. And essentially, I think that's what's carried me through, alongside some skills and some knowledge that I've acquired. But if I can remember as a human that that's probably where I sit, that's where my greatest skill set is, then I can't go far wrong. And it's such a relief to be able to sit in confidence with that and go, yes, all these physio skills and whatever other business skills and things I acquire can come within that. But essentially, I need to make people feel comfortable and make them laugh, and then I'll be all right.
Yeah, I relate to that completely, Joe. Leaving school as like head girl and head of captain of hockey and everything, and then going to physio and being okay, but not amazing, and then going into business and being right back down. So being comfortable with being back down at the bottom of ladders all the time. And I think related to that last point around kind of the coaching, that's probably the bit I think we undervalue the most, because we put that the value actually on that technical manual side, that when it then comes to valuing physio, we undervalue the communication and the empowerment aspect that we give people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, both. When I grow up, I want to be both of you. And if there is an emergent symbolic leadership group in the future and you two are on it, then I'll be very happy.
Thank you so much, Joe, for the opportunity to talk.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of day. And yes, I look forward to this podcast going out and being listened to, hopefully far and wide, and getting some great responses and reactions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I really enjoyed that conversation with Nicola and Helen, and particularly the leadership discussion at the end. It has left me feeling quite excited about the future for our profession, and perhaps some of the people that might be emerging as leaders, and possibly under perhaps slightly different definition of leadership than we might consider at first hand. As always, let me know if you enjoyed the episode. If you're enjoying YouMatter in general, then please go on to one of the platforms and leave us a review. It always helps to make sure that these episodes reach other clinicians and other people who might be interested, supported, helped by listening to YouMatter. Particularly if you're a business owner or someone moving into business ownership, I would love to hear your reflections on this discussion and also to hear about your own experiences. So do let me know. You can contact me via mehab, joe@mehab.co.uk. And there's more information about Mehab and the services I offer on my website. Again, www.mehab.co.uk. So if you are someone, and in this case, a business owner, being all things to people in your business, maybe still to your patients, at home, in all spheres of life, then remember to take time to set some boundaries around the time which isn't for everybody else, but sometimes just for you, because you matter.